Okay, welcome to another lovely Kabbalah class. Today we're going to discover the deep insights of the Kabbalah of Tallit. Okay, we all know, we all have lots of memories of a Tallit, whether it's our own Tallit, our parents' Tallit. We remember maybe as children being under the Tallit of our father in Shul. It's one of the 613 mitzvot is to wear a talis. It's particularly a mitzvah for men. Women are exempt from talis, although it says that if a woman wants to, she could. The Shulchan Aruch says that she could wear talis. It's not customary that they do so, but the obligation of a talis is actually incumbent upon men. A talis for a man especially is you get very attached to your talis, to the point that we know that everyone, when they die, they're buried in shrouds. It's customary to bury a man in addition to the shrouds, also to wrap them up in a talis. I don't know if you've ever watched a funeral in Israel. It's quite stark. In Israel, over here, we get buried in caskets in the diaspora. But in Israel, they bury the person straight in the shrouds, and so you see like a body in a talis for a man usually, and they usually take the talis and they pull off one of the tzitzit, so it shouldn't be a kosher talis anymore because you don't really have the obligation to wear the talis after 120. So. But it's something that's very spiritual, and you get very, very attached to the talis. I'm going to talk today about what is the spiritual significance of the talis. As I mentioned, it's something that you even take with you to the grave. So there's a story of a rabbi once walked into a quiet shul. It was the middle of the day. It wasn't during services. He walks inside, and he hears a little crying. He hears crying in the shul. There's nobody in the shul. Who's crying? So he goes to the corner and he sees there's a talis. Moshe's talis is crying. So the rabbi asks the talis, "Why are you crying?" The talis says, "I am so lonely. I am all alone. My owner every Shabbos goes golfing. He doesn't wear me. He's never there for me to be worn. I'm not being used. I feel neglected. I feel abused." The rabbi says, "Don't worry about this, the talis. Don't worry about your being forgotten." The rabbi says to the talis, "There will be a day that will come that the only thing that Moshe will have, he won't have his golf clubs. He won't have anything else. All he'll have is you, the talis. So you'll be able to be with Moshe forever and ever. Not to worry." I hope you don't consider this a morbid story. What story? So the rabbi says, Talisil, don't be afraid. There'll be a time where you'll be the only thing that Moshe will be looking at. No one else. No golf courses, no nothing, just the talis. So talis is a form of attachment. And today we're going to talk about what is the spiritual concept of the talis. And we all know a talis is made up of two things. There's the talis, which is the garment, and there is the tzitzit. The Torah says that if you wear a four-cornered garment, you are obligated to put on it tzitzit, like strings, at the edge of the talis. So here we go. I brought my talis here, you see. I'm going to have a little bit, arts and crafts. We're going to have hands-on. There you go. Huh? Show and share, right? Show and tell. Right. So here we go. So here's my talis, you see? Okay. So at the edge of the talis, here we have the garments, you see. In order for a talis, if you wear a regular garment like a suit or something, you don't have to wear a talis. Right? But if it has four corners, the Torah says, four corners, like the four corners of the earth, you have to have the tzitzit. So here you go. I'll show you a little bit over here. You see, you have the talis. So here it is. it's cornered garment. You see it has a corner. See that? The corner, it's an absolute corner. If it's rounded, it doesn't need a tzitzit. It has to be a pointy corner. You see, so that's the corner of the garment. So then you have the tzitzit, which is the strings, the fringes that come at the edge of the talus. You wear a four-cornered garment, you need to wear tzitzit. So that's, people have to know, like sometimes you wear like a poncho or something like that has four corners, and then you have to wear a talus. You can sometimes wear, like, let's say, a tuxedo. A tuxedo also can sometimes have, if it has a cornered garment, corners in the front and two corners in the back of the garment, then it needs to have tzitzit. However, it needs to be more than 50% of the garment. It has to go off the back more than 50% to be considered a four-cornered garment. So when you have the four-cornered garment, you have to put on the tzitzis. So this is the way it goes. So what is the spiritual value of this of the talus? So there is a lot of mystical ideas that are involved in the talus. In the Torah it says, King David says, Oita Oirka Salma, God clothes himself with light, like a garment. He covers himself in a garment of light. So there is a mystical idea of the talus. The talus is a garment that surrounds us. There are two kinds of talisim. There's the smaller talus that's worn by youngsters, also by children, and I wear it also every day. Underneath my shirt, I wear a talus with a four-cornered garment. So the Torah says that God also wears like a talus, like a chazan. He puts on a talus. I will talk a little bit about that concept, but primarily the talus and the tzitzit. There are many reminders in Judaism, things to remind us of God. So we have, for instance, we spoke about the mezuzah on the door. Every time you walk in and out of the house, you remind yourself of Hashem. So there's another reminder of God, especially when you're praying, is to wear a talit, which surrounds us. It's very, very therapeutic. When you put on a talus and it surrounds you, you feel like you are covered and surrounded by Hashem. And the Torah says you shall place on the corner of the talus, you place these tzitzit, strings. And there's a particular tradition of what the strings are supposed to look like. So, you see, if we go over here, you go a little closer, you see what it looks like. You see there are knots. We have there knots. You see knots, and then there are strings. Okay, knots and strings. So, how does the tzitzit remind us of the commandments of God? The Torah says you shall put tzitzit on the four corners of your garment, and you look at them, and you will remember all the mitzvahs of Hashem. What is it about the tzitzit that reminds us of the commandments of God? How does it remind us of the commandments of God? Here I'm going to tell you something that's a mystical idea, but it's brought down in the commentaries on the Torah. How does the tzitzit remind us of the presence of God? How does it remind us of the mitzvahs of Hashem? And here you go, because the word for tzitzit, which is placed on the talus, what is the mystical, what is the numerical value of the word tzitzit? So again, many times we speak about numerology. Every Hebrew letter has a numerical value. So the word tzitzit is spelled tzadik yud taf. So tzadik is 90. And yud is 10. So it's tzadik yud is 90 plus 10 twice. Tzadik yud, right? So that's 200. That's tzitzit. The taf at the end is 400. So the numerical value of all the commandment, all the letters that make up the word tzitzit is what? You look at the tzitzis, you remind yourself of that, is how many numbers? 600. Again, Tzaddik is 90, Yud is 10. Tzaddik is 90, Yud is 10. Taf is 400. Altogether adds up to a grand total of 600. So we have the number 600. How many mitzvahs are there? There are 613 commandments of the Torah. We all know this Taryag mitzvahs. So we're still short 13. By looking at the tzitzit, you only remember the word tzitzit, which is a numerical value of 600. Where do you get the other 13? And the answer is the knots and the strings. How many knots are there? So let's count them. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 knots that you have on the tzitzis. You see, if you look at the tzitzis, you'll see there are 5 knots. 5 knots. You see, okay. And then, how many strings are there? We count the strings there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 strings. So you have 5 knots plus 8 strings is a grand total of how much? 13. So the actual strings of the tzitzis and the knots reminds us the number 13. Now we know as Jews the number 13 is very significant. Why is 13 significant? 13, we know 13 is bar mitzvah, but besides for bar mitzvah, 13, the word echad, which means one, the oneness of God, is the number 13. Again, the word echad, which means one is Hashem, aleph is 1, ches is 8, dalet is 4, a grand total of 13. So the oneness of God is in the number 13. So we have in the word tzitzit, you have 600, 5 knots, 8 strings, altogether, it reminds us of 613. So when you surround yourself with the talis, you are supposed to meditate on them, but look at them, look at the tzitzit, and remind yourself of all the commandments of God. How many commandments? 613, because it's implicit in the numerical value of the word plus the knots and the strings. So this is one of the mystical ideas about the talis. Now, in the olden days, they used to have, in addition to the strings, which is made from white wool, one of the strings used to be a string of blue wool. I mean, there was 8 regular strings, and the 8th string was made of a particular blue wool. The blue wool is called techelet. So if you look at the biblical text, it says you shall put on the tzitzis on your 4-cornered garment, and you shall also add to it a string. One of the strings should be made from blue wool. Now, why blue wool? Because blue, it's brought down, is a reminder of the heavens. Right? It says the sea is blue because it reflects the sky, which is blue, which really reflects some higher spiritual aspects of God, which that is what blue represents. Blue is a reflection of the higher worlds of God's presence. That's why many of the tzitzit in the olden days, they all used to have, one of the strings used to be blue. There are some people today that believe that they found that blue wool. Now, in temple times, in the times of the Torah, there was a particular fish that they used to create that dye from. The Talmud tells us it was a fish called the chilazon. It was a special fish, and that fish had a blue blood, a blue dye, blue-blooded fish. And it had a special dye that they extracted from this particular fish. And from that, they were able to make the blue string for the tzitzit. The Talmud says that it was a very rare fish that used to surface once in 70 years. Well, once in 70 usually is an expression like when they wanted to say once in a blue moon, they used to say once in 70 years. I don't know if it was exactly 70 years, but it was a very, very rare fish. It was called the chilazon. And they used to have it on the tzitzit. They used to have it about 150 years ago, over 100 years ago. There was a Rebbe in Europe, in Poland. His name was the Radziner Rebbe. And he claimed that he found that dye, that blue wool, that fish. And his Hasidim started to wear tzitzit with blue strings on it. One of the 8 strings, they wore the blue string. There was a great debate about it about 150 years ago. Most of the rabbis did not accept that this was the correct origin of that dye. And therefore, in most shuls, they didn't wear it. Only the Radziner Hasidim, the followers of the Radziner Rebbe, they used to wear it. In recent years, even though many people did not accept that version of the blue wool, recently there's been a big movement to reinstate the blue wool, the blue string. There's a group in Israel, many people, many Orthodox Jews, that claim that they have found in Israel the origins of this blue wool. And that's why you see a lot of people today, if you go around, you'll see in many shuls, they do have the blue wool. They claim it's not from a fish, but it comes from a kind of a snail of some sorts. And that snail creates a kind of a purple dye, not blue, but purple. But after you leave it in the sun overnight, and then it stays overnight, you leave it in the sun for a while, you leave it overnight, the next morning you come, and it turns blue. So if you go to Israel today, it's an interesting thing. If you want to look it up, you can go to these farms where they manufacture this blue dye, and they make the tzitzit from the blue wool. You can actually go to Israel today. It's a nice part on an Israeli tour. One day when we'll travel again, we hope to be able to go there one day to Israel. You can imagine one day they're going to open up the borders again, and we'll be able to fly to places. We look forward to that, especially to go to Israel. Especially since Israel is the first country to be vaccinated from the countries of the world. But when you go to Israel, you can go near the West Bank over there. They have numerous places where part of the tour is they show you how to create the blue wool. Our tradition still is we don't wear the blue wool. What we do have on the talesim is we have on the talus itself, not on the strings, but on the talus itself. If you ever see all the taluses, they all have like stripes. And many people ask, where does the stripes come from? Right? There's it's white, the talus, and it usually has like black stripes. Sometimes they have some fancy talesim have other colors. But why is the talus striped? It's a good question. I did some research on it, and the answer is that it says somewhere that the talus should be the same color as the tzitzit. So since the tzitzit is white, so the talus is primarily white. But since you're supposed to have also a blue color, a coloring on the tzitzit, so that what they used to have in the olden days, they used to have like a bluish, very dark bluish stripe on the garment. So the garment reflects the same colors that are on the tzitzit. So since the tzitzit is white and blue, so the garment was also white and blue. Now in the olden days, they didn't have really like many colors. They weren't so advanced. So that's how it evolved. It was a dark blue, so it became black. So that's why we have the black stripe on the talus to reflect the blue, which is meant to be on the strings. Everything is tradition, how things evolve, etc., etc. There are particular stripes. Chabad has a certain stripe, others have different stripes of the stripe that's actually on the talus. Some of the Kabbalists, they don't wear the black stripes, they wear white stripes on the talus, because today we don't have the blue wool, so it doesn't really reflect. So it's just white that's on the talus. But here we go into as I explained before, the Kabbalistic idea of the blue wool is you have white, which reminds us of purity. That's the white wool. That's the purity, and the blue reminds us of things which are heavenly. So there are a lot of symbolisms in the talus. The white reflects the white light, and the blue reflects the blue light. If you ever look in a fire, you'll see that there's a blue light. There's a blue light closest to the wick. That's the blue. And then there is the white part of the light. So there's the white light and there's the blue light. So the Kabbalists talk about different reflections and different aspects of the. Now, the talus and the tzitzit are different. The talus is a garment that we put on our body, right? We put all around our body. We wear the talus on ourselves, right? And then the tzitzit sort of hangs from us. So what does the Kabbalah have to say about that? What does the Kabbalah have to say about the surrounding talus? And as I started at the beginning of the class, I was explaining to you that God surrounds himself with light. He embraces himself in light. And we too, we embrace ourselves in the faith of God. We surround ourselves in God's presence. That's what the talus sort of represents. That we realize that we are in God's world. The greatest thing that we possibly can have is a hug from God. Right? If God can hug us. When someone hugs you, they surround you with their arms, let's say, right? So the talus is symbolic of a divine hug. What is a hug? A hug is something that's greater than you, that surrounds you. And you are lost in that. And there are many aspects of our relationship with God where we are meant to realize that we don't know everything. And we know just very little compared to God. God is so much greater. He is infinite. He is the infinite light that surrounds us. In the Kabbalah, they call it Oir Makif, the surrounding light. There are two kinds of light that comes from Hashem. One which comes into us, and the other one that surrounds us. I'm just going to talk for a moment about the surrounding light. The surrounding light of God is that part of God that we don't understand. That's unfathomable. But we have faith and trust in that. We lose ourselves in God. We surround ourselves in the talus. The talus is greater than us. It's representative of the part of Hashem that as much as we ever try to understand why there's so much suffering in the world, can't wrap your head around it. The only thing like when you go through suffering is you lose yourself in God. You say, God, give me a hug. I don't get it, I don't understand it, but I am surrounded by you, and you give me great comfort in my moments of not understanding. That's the symbolism of the surrounding light, the talus, which is beyond us, which is unfathomable, which is we can't get. For that you need faith. It's not intellect, it's faith. Because we can't understand it. Like a year like this year, we don't get it. Nobody knows why, Everybody thinks tonight is 2021. Everyone says 2020. Nobody understood 2020. It was a year unfathomable. Nobody for the rest of time. Nobody. What was this year about? Whole bunch of people locked in the room, During World War II, the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote that these are the birth pangs of Mashiach. The birth pangs of Mashiach. What are the birth pangs of Mashiach? Friedrich Rebbe wrote about during World War II, Holocaust, difficult time, right? He says you have to realize it's like birth pangs. We don't understand. Sometimes we don't get things. But you walk into a hospital sometimes and you hear a woman is screaming, she's shouting. You ask, what's going on? Why is she screaming? You say she's having a baby. Oh, having a baby, you know. Suddenly it makes a little bit sense. You know, it's like, it's still painful, it's terrible, right? But it's birth pangs. Birth pangs, if you go into the hospital and you're delivering stones, if you're having, let's say, kidney stones, you're passing kidney stones. So you're also screaming then, right? But then there's no logic or no rhyme or reason to that, right? It's like something that nobody gets. What are these? What are you screaming about? But when the woman's having a baby, oh, so this is what the Friedrich Rebbe said. That the Friedrich Rebbe was speaking during World War II. He said, view this time as birth pangs, because the Mashiach is on his way. It's very painful, it hurts a lot, but something good is coming out of it. And the same thing, I want to look at this time, this year, this 2020 that we're coming out of, I want to look at it as birth pangs. Something good is going to come out. We don't know yet what, but please God, there's going to be a good thing coming out soon. A baby is being born. Some revelation, some tremendous thing is happening, and that's Amen. Yeah, and that's the birth pangs of Mashiach. Especially now, everybody wears masks. You know, you walk into shul, you see everybody has a mask on. You go anywhere there are people, masks. So why is everyone wearing masks? I think it's like we're in the hospital, and we're all the baby's being born, so we all have to wear the masks. We're all by in the delivery room. Where the doctor in the olden days, you wore a mask like that. You were in the delivery room. That's when you put on a mask. So we're all together in the delivery room, and something special is going to happen. Something special is going to come out of this. But why you're going through it, it's unfathomable. It's not understood. Right now, there's so many people suffering and so many people dying, and we don't get it. And that's when we wrap ourselves in the talis. We wrap ourselves in the talis, meaning we surround ourselves with God. We realize that Hashem is surrounding us and hugging us, almost like a parent hugs the child when it goes to the doctor. You know, the parent is hugging the child. Hashem also hugs us in these difficult times, in these challenging times. That's the first part of the talis, the surrounding light. That's what the talis that goes around us represents. And now we have another part of the talis, which is the tzitzit. The Kabbalah speaks about the tzitzit is from the surrounding light comes the strings. Strings are like, it's like, these are the channels. If you can imagine it. The strings are like the conduits. Hashem gives us, even though we primarily don't understand anything about God, that's the talis. But the tzitzit is the light that constricts and confines. In Kabbalah they call it tzimtzum. What's tzimtzum? Tzimtzum is a contraction. Almost like I said, like contraction, like having a baby. But it's the contracting light. So what Hashem does is He takes from His infinite great light, and He brings it down to us that we can get a little taste, a little understanding of Hashem. Hashem gave us the Torah, and He gave us the mitzvahs, so we can sort of connect to Him to a small degree. He gave us opportunities to connect to Hashem. So the string is the connection that we can make and to relate to God to some degree. So the talis is the part of God that's beyond us. The tzitzit is the part of God that sort of like contracts itself and comes like, it's like a teacher comes into a class, and the teacher takes a very, very difficult idea and tries to make it something that'll be palatable for the student, and gives them the comprehension, the understanding of what it is. And that is the idea of the tzitzit. So this is what the Torah says. Torah says you have the mitzvah commandment to put on the tallis, to put on tzitzis on a four-cornered garment, to put on the blue wool, which we said the blue represents the sky. And then the tzitzit, we said, it represents the 613 mitzvahs of Hashem. So you have the tallis, which is the faith in God, the surrounding light, and then that comes down for what? It says you should look at the tzitzis, and the tzitzis will avert you from sin. By looking at the tzitzis, that will save you. It says, look at the tzitzis, and you shall not follow your heart and your eyes, which you naturally and instinctively follow. So the tallis is meant to be like a tool to save us from sin. In the Talmud, it says about a fellow he was about to sin. He went to some kind of a house of ill repute, and he was taking off his garments, and he was taking off his tzitzit, and the tzitzit hit him in the face. And he said, "Oi, what am I doing? What am I doing here?" The tzitzit saved him. The tallis and the tzitzit, that's what saved him from moving ahead in the realm of sin. But what is this? The Torah says, do not follow your eyes and your heart, which you naturally follow, but look at the tzitzit and avert yourself from the realm of sin. Now, we know that the world is generally a superficial world. It's a world of superficiality. We follow our hearts and our eyes. That's the way we are. The human being is a superficial creature. He follows whatever their hearts and eyes. So the Torah tells us, no, don't follow your heart and your eyes. You have to follow your soul. You have to follow what's on the inside. And the tzitzis is used as a means to keep us away from looking at life that way. The Torah wants us to be deep people. It wants us not to be superficial. A bride and a groom, before they get married, what's the first thing that happens? Before the groom and bride go to the chuppah, what they do is a ceremony known as the badeking. The badeking is when the groom walks into the bride's chamber, and he takes a veil and he places it over the face of the bride. Why does he do that? What's the purpose of that? You would think it's sort of counterintuitive. If you're marrying this woman, wouldn't we think that you should not? It shouldn't be a veiling. It should be an unveiling. You should take the veil and remove it from her, so you see who you're marrying, right? It's a mitzvah that when you marry someone, you should see who the person is. So what's the reason why we place the veil on the bride? I saw a beautiful explanation, is that it teaches us not to be superficial. Because when you marry someone, naturally and instinctively, you're thinking about the externals. Torah tells us no. What are you marrying here? You're not marrying a body, you're marrying a soul. You're marrying a soulmate. So look behind the veil. Look beyond the surface. Look deeper than skin. Look deeper than... That's who you're marrying. So marriages that are just based on externalities, unfortunately, don't last well. If it's just based on the externals. Obviously, you have to be externally compatible too. But it can't be primarily an external experience. A marriage is just the external beauty is a tool. It's a channel to tap into the inner soul of that person. And this is what the Torah warns us. The Torah says, do not follow your heart and your eyes, which you are accustomed to follow. We want you, as the Jewish people, to be deeper, deeper than surface. Goldie, you take the phone. Come here. It's Benjamin's part. It's fine with the one.
Hello?
Yeah. So we want you to be deeper than surface,
Right.
not to be a superficial people. So when things are superficial, they end superficially. But in life, whether it's marriage, whether it's our relationship with our family, with our children, with our friends, things can't be external. Now, today's day and age, we're in the generation of Facebook. What does Facebook mean? It's a face. Right? That's what it is. It's Facebook. It's a book of faces. That's externalities. You know, people, they find a nice picture. They put up a nice picture and they make believe that they are that picture. In most cases, they're showing you a picture of what they looked like 30 years ago. You know, they don't even look like that. They don't even come close to that, right? It's a generation of Facebook where it's external. Torah says that one of the disciplines of the tzitzit is, it says, look at the tzitzit, meditate on the tzitzit, remind yourself of the mitzvahs of Hashem, and remind yourself that life is more than just externals. You have to remind yourself it's the mitzvahs, the good deeds that you do in life. That's what really counts. Not the faces, the external faces of the world, but the internal pnimiyut, the inside of the people. And those are a number of the ideas I thought I'd share with you today about some of the mystical aspects of the Tallis. So through looking at the world from that lens of not focusing on externals, looking at the internal, reminding ourselves Hashem is surrounding us and Hashem is close to us, and He also gives us opportunities to get close to Him in an internalized way. Through that, we'll merit the coming Mashiach Tzidkeinu v'meidav yameinu. Amen. Anybody got any thoughts, any questions, anything?
Amen to that. Rabbi, thank you so much. You gave me so much insight with all the details, the explanations. Baruch Hashem, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's my pleasure.
Yeah.
Rabbi, to you and everybody, it should be a healthy and a happy 2021.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. We only can go. We only can go uphill. We only can go uphill, guys.
I've got a question.
Yeah, question. Go ahead.
So the question I've got, I also thank you for the beautiful explanations. It's just so enlightening. As a woman, we can surround ourselves, and I imagine the most important way is by lighting Shabbat candles. Are there other ways in that clearly we can't wear a talis and tzitzit? So how else do we surround ourselves with that light?
Well, like you said, there are many mitzvahs that women do. When they light the Shabbos candle, they surround themselves in the light of Shabbos. When if a woman goes to a mikveh, she's surrounding herself also in that water, the holy waters, which is also a mitzvah of surrounding light. And the woman, it says, is the akeret abayis. She brings holiness to her home. So the home is also something that you surround yourself in. So there are numerous mitzvot which are applicable particularly to women, which are also surrounding mitzvahs, right? And like I said before, it's also there is the actual faith of God, which is a mitzvah that surrounds us wherever we go. So there are numerous, I wouldn't say substitutes, but it's their way of accomplishing that particular mitzvah.
Thank you.
Okay. Very good. To all the men and the women, may you be surrounded with a lot of light. Yes, question.
Yes, why do only married men wear talit? Unmarried
There's different traditions. In the Chabad tradition, we only start the talis we wear when we get married, but we wear a talit katan. We wear also a talis that we wear underneath. I'm not going to get undressed over here, but you see it's over here. You see the tzitzit you wear. So that little boys start already when they're 3 years old, 4 years old after the upshare. They wear that already. But the larger talis, the prayer shawl as we call it, that in many communities they start at a wedding, In other communities, they start after bar mitzvah. In many of the Ashkenazi communities, they start already at bar mitzvah. So this, whatever the tradition is a valid tradition, and everyone should follow whatever their custom is.
Thank you.
Okay? Thanks for the question. Okay, guys, have a great one. See you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Healthy and safe.
Healthy.